And we are back with the fourth segment of the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fourth segment, we're going to do a very quick recap of all of the games that went down in the NFL yesterday. And really, we're going to, let's see, what team should we start with? What team should we start with today? So, you know what? We're going to start with the first prediction that I made, which was the Packers beating the Bears. And of course, the Packers, they ended up beating the Bears. It was a really, really close one, though. I will say that. It was a very, very, very close game. But as always, the Packers, they defeated the Bears. The Bears now hold the biggest losing streak to any opponent. I believe they've lost 11 straight games to the Packers for the last few years. And it's really not been looking good for Chicago against the Packers. It seems like every single year the Packers just own them. Every single year. And this game was no exception. And the way that this ended just completely ruined the fans, completely ruined all of their hopes. Because the Bears, any game against the Packers, it feels like that's their Super Bowl. Like, they always try, and they always want to beat the Packers, but they never ever are able to do it. So this is why it's like their Super Bowl. And the fans, they really get into it, even though they end up losing in the end. And the way that they lost was absolutely hilarious. I mean, the Caleb Williams, he ended up driving the team down the field in the final play of the game. And it was 7 plays. He was able to drive them down to 42 yards, well in field goal range. But of course, the kick was blocked, and that resulted in the Packers squeezing out a win 20-19. It is the most Bears way to lose in a game, honestly. Like, Jordan Love, he played pretty solid. He only threw 17 passes, but he made them count, completing 13 of them and throwing for 261 passing yards. He threw an interception in this game, but he also threw a touchdown in this game. Josh Jacobs, he ended the game with 18 rushing attempts, 76 yards, and 1 touchdown. And Jordan Love also ran for a touchdown in this matchup. And, I mean, the Bears, they're just the Bears. I did not expect them to win this game at all. And this was probably the only time that they would be able to beat Green Bay, because next time they match up, they're going to have to play in Green Bay, and Green Bay usually always has a huge matchup advantage when they play in Lambeau Field, because their fans are absolutely incredible. Now, on the Bears side, Caleb Williams, he did not score a touchdown in this game, but he also did not throw an interception. That's sort of been a pretty common trend with Caleb Williams in a lot of these games. I mean, the last time Caleb threw a touchdown was against Jacksonville. And that was in, let's see, what week was that in? That was the 13th of October. So it's been almost a whole month, and this man has yet to throw another touchdown. But on the bright side, he also hasn't thrown an interception either. But, I mean, again, this is just pitiful. I mean, he is a high pick in the draft. A lot of people have expectations for him, and I also have expectations for him. And he's not been living up to it at all. And let's see, who played well? DeAndre Swift, he ended up getting 71 rushing yards on the day, along with 1 rushing touchdown. And Rashawn Johnson also ended the game with a rushing touchdown. But again, this game just was never in doubt, really. If you're a Packers fan, then you know exactly why. Speaking of Packers fans, their former quarterback Aaron Rodgers ended up losing yet again to the Colts. And it would seem like the benching of Anthony Richardson was ultimately ended up being a big reason why the Colts ended up winning this game. So there were reports going around that ever since Anthony Richardson was benched, he ultimately sort of grew up, and he realized that, okay, I need to do a little bit more. I need to be a little bit more for this team. And that's what the reports are saying. And in this game, he ended up completing 20 of his 30 pass attempts, incredibly accurate. Also threw for a touchdown and was able to accumulate 272 passing yards in this game, along with 32 rushing yards in this game. And he also accounted for 2 rushing touchdowns for this team as well. So essentially, he scored every single touchdown for the Colts offensively. And meanwhile, the Jets, of course, they're stuck to being the Jets. Aaron Rodgers, he did not play bad, but he also did not play good enough to win this game either. Completed 22 of his 29 pass attempts, only 184 yards. He has yet to throw 300 passing yards in a game, by the way. He did throw for 2 touchdowns. Breece Hall, he ran for a touchdown as well, and also accumulated for 78 rushing yards. Devontae Adams has been rather lackluster. And it really seemed like all the hype around Devontae Adams going to the Jets was all for nothing. And, I mean, the game, it seemed like the Jets were going to be able to put this game away, especially in the fourth quarter. The Jets opened up with a touchdown to make the score 24-16, but the Colts answered right back with a touchdown of their own to make the score 22-24. And instead of capitalizing with another touchdown for Aaron Rodgers, they had to settle with a field goal. This was a 13-play, 53-yard drive that ended in a field goal. And ultimately, it left enough time for the Colts and Anthony Richardson to go on a game-winning touchdown drive and put the game away 28-27. And in the final plays of the game, the Aaron Rodgers ended up taking a sack, and the Jets ended up losing. And one of the things that I do like to note about this game was that, let's see, Sauce Gardner, the very popular corner on the Jets and considered to be a very elite corner, he recently in a press conference a week ago, like a while ago before this game started, that he felt like he did not need to focus on tackle drills because everybody knew how to tackle. And ironically enough, he missed a tackle which caused the game-winning touchdown. So maybe they don't know everything about tackling. But this wasn't just an Aaron Rodgers effort in losing. This was a whole team effort. The team just collapsed, and I mean, the defense let Aaron Rodgers down again with the game in the balance. I'm sure a lot of you Packers fans, you already know exactly how that feels. And I mean, I picked the Jets to win in this matchup, but they let me down. I should have never picked the Jets, and in fact, I think I'm done picking the Jets to win in these games because I mean, let's face it, these Jets, they're abysmal. They've had a better record with Zach Wilson at quarterback than they've had with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, which is very crazy to say, but true. And it's really unfortunate that that's sort of how the career of Aaron Rodgers has been turning out on New York. It's like apparently they have all of the pieces, but it's just they cannot get these games, they cannot win these games. And it really is unfortunate because, I mean, when Tom Brady left to the Patriots, I cannot stand Tom Brady, but the very first year that he left, he was able to win a Super Bowl. And as much as I don't think it was just Brady for being the reason why the Bucs ended up winning that Super Bowl, he still won it and he still got the Super Bowl MVP. There are several asterisks on a lot of those games, but, you know, aside from that, I'm not going to talk about that. I could talk about that, however, if you guys want me to talk about it, because Brady has had several moments where he gets bailed out by his team and he gets incredibly lucky, but nobody wants to talk about it. But I'm not going to get into that. Again, let me know if you guys want me to get into that. But that was a game that I ended up getting wrong, but the Rams, they ended up beating the Patriots 28-22, and Drake May, he was pretty mediocre in this game, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, but again, way better off with Drake May than they were with Jacoby Brissett. Matt Stafford had a great game in this matchup with 2 touchdowns, 295 yards, 4 touchdowns, excuse me. And the Rams, they ended up winning like I expected them to. The Saints, they also ended up winning against the Browns, but again, it's against the Browns. Derek Carr, he's such a tease. He threw 248 yards and 2 touchdowns in this matchup. And Taysom Hill ended the game with 3 touchdowns. On 7 attempts, he rushed for 138 yards, which is incredible. And, I mean, that is incredible rushing stats coming in from him. Now, the Dolphins, they ended up completely destroying the Raiders, 34-19. Tua Tagovailoa ended with 3 touchdowns, 288 passing yards. And I mean, Tyreek Hill, he has not been the monster that we've seen in previous years, Jonnu Smith ended up leading the game in receiving yards for the Dolphins. He did not lead the entirety of the game. Brock Bowers did in receiving yards with 126. Tyreek Hill did score a touchdown, but Jonnu Smith ended up scoring 2 touchdowns. Now, another game that I knew was never going to be in doubt was the Lions going up against the Jaguars. The Lions destroyed the Jaguars. They ended up winning 52-6. Jared Goff threw for 412 yards and 4 touchdowns. And let's see, the receivers, they were unbelievable. I mean, Jameson Williams ended with 4 receptions on 124 yards with 1 touchdown. And Amon-Ra St. Brown ended with 11 receptions, 161 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I mean, they were just on completely different. They were just a completely different team than the Jags, and the Jags really could not compete with them. And I really think that their head coach is most likely going to get fired after the results of this game. Now, in the next matchup, the Vikings, they ended up beating the Titans. I picked the Vikings to win this matchup. Sam Darnold, he did not throw an interception in this game. He threw 2 touchdowns. And, I mean, Justin Jefferson, he did not catch a touchdown in this matchup, but he did record 81 receiving yards in this game. And there's nothing that really needs to be said because the Titans are just not that good of a team. I already talked about the Ravens and the Steelers matchup. The Broncos against the Falcons. As I've said before, Kirk Cousins can never really stray too far away from having a 500 record. And Bo Nix played phenomenally in this game. 300 passing yards, 307, along with 4 passing touchdowns on the day. And, I mean, the Falcons, they could only muster 2 field goals. And it was just a bad game offensively for the Falcons. The Seahawks, they ended up beating the Niners. I'll talk a little bit more about that game in one of the future segments. But essentially, Geno Smith ended up winning the game for the Seahawks in this game. He ended up leading a game-winning touchdown drive. He did not really play fantastic. I mean, 221 passing yards. He did throw an interception. But Brock Purdy also threw an interception and only threw for 159 passing yards, but he did throw a touchdown, and he also ran for a touchdown. Christian McCaffrey has been very, very bad in these returns. He did accumulate over 100 yards, in the air and also on the ground, but again, it was just barely 100 yards. And on the ground, he only accounted for 79 rushing yards on 19 attempts. So again, not the same player that we've seen before, but again, his season is still young. This is only his second week playing, but the Niners, they definitely aren't the same machine that they were previous years. And the Seahawks, they ended up winning this game despite a lackluster performance from Geno Smith. And another game that I'm going to talk a little bit more about in depth in the future is the Bengals going up against the Chargers. The Bengals, they ended up losing 27-34 to the Chargers, and it really looked like this game was going to go into overtime. And both of these quarterbacks, they played really solid in the game overall. It was more of a second half performance from Joe Burrow that gave them a chance to win. He threw for 356 passing yards and 3 touchdowns in this game. And if it wasn't for their team record, he would have a really solid argument for being in the MVP conversation. T. Higgins had a great game in this matchup, 9 receptions and 148 receiving yards to go along with that as well. And on the Chargers side, Justin Herbert threw for almost 300 yards and ended with 2 passing touchdowns. But J.K. Dobbins ended up sealing this game for the Chargers. And he scored the game-winning touchdown in the end. And both quarterbacks in the fourth quarter, towards the end, they played as badly as humanly possible. And, I mean, it ultimately ended up leading to the Chargers winning the game off of a touchdown run. And, I mean, the Chargers, they ended up fumbling the ball to give a chance to the Bengals, and the Bengals capitalized with a touchdown, tying the game 27-27. And then the Chargers ended up punting again, but the Bengals missed a field goal, keeping the score tied 27-27. The Chargers punted, and then the Bengals missed another field goal. So if they would have made both of those field goals, then the game would have been way closer than what it actually was. And then the Chargers punted again, and then the Bengals punted it right back. And finally, when the final opportunity to score, the Chargers ended up running the ball all the way into the end zone. The Bengals missed several tackles, and they ended up winning the game. And that's the recap. Again, I'll recap a little bit more of these games a bit more in depth in future segments, but that's all that I have to say on this fourth segment. So now we're going to go ahead and go into the fifth and the final segment where we talk about the battle in Dallas, the battle in Texas, whatever you want. The Texas Bowl, if you want to call it that, because the Texans, they're going to match up against the Cowboys. So I'll be right back after this short break, so be sure to stay tuned.